Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Cindy Golding. I'm representative from House District 83 in Lane County. So I'm your moderator for today. I'd like to welcome you. We're looking at an overall issue here. It's about carbon sequestration, but it's also an issue that every American should be aware of. It's about private property rights, and it's about how they're attacking our lifestyles, our property from every angle. So we're going to be covering a lot of different things today. No one should be sitting out on this. It isn't just about whether your land is impacted, it's about whether your community is impacted, but this is something that will affect every American if we allow this to continue. As Midwesterners, this conference is to pull citizens together to form a strong bond of defense against these corporate takeovers. And I want to thank everyone for being here. But we're going to go through a couple of details. If you have your cell phone, please turn it to off or silent, airplane mode, whatever works for you. This is being live streamed, so if you have folks that want to watch this, it's live streamed. Do we have is there some app that people can share?
It is on the New American Rumble channel. So
Okay.
in the New American Rumble channel.
So this will be on the New American Rumble channel if you have friends that would like to see it. The bathrooms, some details. You go out past the registration desk to the right is where the restrooms are. And then everyone should have a packet, a red packet. If you didn't get one, please pick it up. Inside there's a couple of sheets. There's a large sheet that we're going to ask you to fill out, and we're going to collect those at the end of this event. And then there's a small sheet that you can take with you. We ask that you look at all the materials that are in there. There's a lot of really great information in the packets. So then also lunch will be from noon to 1, and there's some restaurants here. The Hacienda restaurant right here in the hotel, and then there's some other local restaurants. So, and we also will be videotaping this event. After this session ends at 3-ish, we'll be having some breakout sessions for what's next. How do we move forward with all the information that we have here? What are our action plans, and how are we going to impact this? Not just for us, not just for our farms, but for our country, for the Midwest. The Midwest has become like a blank slate for these corporate takeover people. They see our property as vacant land, not farms, and they see our lower populations as an opportunity to take our tax dollars and put it in their pockets. So with that, we're going to start with Larry Salir.
Thank you, Cindy. My name is Larry Seiler.
Seiler, I'm sorry.
Everybody always gets it wrong. That's not a problem. I would like to just say it's a lucky day. I had about a 30-minute sermon written here, but somebody edited it down to 3 minutes. So we've got too many good speakers here, so we want to get to them. But to begin with, I'd like to start with a couple of quotes. The first one is from James Madison. The powers of the federal government are enumerated. It can only operate in certain cases. It has legislative powers on defined and limited objects beyond which it cannot extend its jurisdiction. I've got a couple from Ronald Reagan. Within the covers of the Bible are the answers for all the problems men face. And another one from Ronald is, government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem. Last line I'd like to quote is from the Bible. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verses 19 and 20. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the innocent. Follow justice and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land that the Lord your God has given you. Please pray with me. God and Heavenly Father, we come to you today with love and respect. We know that you are the maker of all. We know that you are in control of our world, our climate, and all that we have. We know that you have the whole world in your hands. But we here on earth struggle with so many issues that seem overwhelming. The Bible in Romans chapter 12, verse 12 says, "Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer." Proverbs chapter 12:15, "The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice." Lord, we ask for hope today, for patience and wisdom. Help us to be faithful to you, and we ask for forgiveness for transgressions we have to you and to others. We humbly ask that you watch over us today. Be with the speakers and give them wisdom to tell us the truth as they know it, and help us to hear and listen. We ask for guidance today as we tackle the huge problem in our midst. Please give traveling mercies to all who have traveled here today, and that they arrive safely back home. You have said that if your people will humble themselves, pray, and seek your face, and turn from our wicked ways, you will forgive and heal our land. O Lord, we need our land healed. Help us to further your kingdom and do your will. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, let us all say, Amen.
Thank you, Larry. And Representative Mark Thompson, would you please, he will be leading us in the pledge.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Former Congressman Steve King will be next. As Steve comes up here, I would like to tell you guys, my county has both CO2 pipelines and massive solar panels. So we have both issues here. Come on up, Steve.
Thank you. Well, the first thing is I want to thank all the people that worked so hard to put this together. I know how many days and nights and phone calls and Zoom calls and emails and texts and all those things that I don't feel like an auctioneer. So the first thing is I want to thank you, Cindy, and I want to thank every face you see around here working. They've been invested in this now for months. And I know how the candle got burned at both ends, and I'm really proud of you all. Second thing is I want to say thank you to all of the rest of you also for the work you're doing that I don't know about, and also being here today and the assignments that I hope you're able to take and willing and eager to take when we finish with this presentation today. We understood that this issue is so complex, you can't package this up in one little op-ed or one little letter to the editor. It's just so deep and so replete with so many components and so complex that it could only be cooked up at, let's say, the World Economic Forum at Davos, Switzerland. And it was. Some of the history of this for me is that I served in Congress 18 years, and part of that time I was chairman of the Constitution Committee, the subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee. I took that job seriously, and I've long been one who reads the Constitution, believes it. I haven't counted how many times I've taken an oath to it, but I would say this to all of you and anybody that wants to raise the issue that any of you and many of you have taken oath to the Constitution over and over again, that means you're taking an oath to the Constitution, from where I stand, as it was understood to mean at the time of its ratification, either the original document or the amendments. And you can't make an oath to the Constitution as some justice decides to amend it, but they amended our Constitution, back in 2005. And I was in Congress when that happened. That was the Kelo decision, which is infamous now among those of us that are trying to defend property rights. And I might go into that further, but I went to the floor. We did a resolution of disapproval of the United States Supreme Court decision. I don't know if that's ever happened before, but I was so livid I went to our majority leader and we cranked out this resolution. And just in a matter of a few days, we had that on the floor, and we debated the decision that came down that took your property rights away. The core of this argument is this: the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution says, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." That for public use term was, so I say, it was altered, amended, distorted, perverted even, by a 5-4 decision in the United States Supreme Court that took those three words out, for public use, and they replaced it with for public purpose. And the city of New London, Connecticut had an economic development plan. They decided that they could condemn Suzette Kelo's home that she had worked hard on, her life's dream, and her neighbors in order to take that land, hand it over to a developer to build a Pfizer pill factory and some other things. Those things actually didn't happen. But in the end, she went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court took that language out. That's what I said on the floor of the House. I didn't know what Justice O'Connor had written in the dissent until later. She had said the same thing, that's exactly what happened. So that has unleashed this horde of top-level investors on us, all across us, with hundreds of miles. Actually, it turns out to be thousands of miles of pipeline. 3,300 miles it's stacked up now that they want to be able to condemn property on. So I'll just say that top to bottom, it's this. This thing was thought of and put together out in Davos at the World Economic Forum. They spread this carbon credit deal and this carbon index idea across Europe. I have faced those people in debate in multiple countries across Europe and at the OSCE that's part of 57 member nation states. So I know the psychology of them. They'll say to me on the side, yeah, this thing's nuts, but I represent these people, and if I told them what I think, they'd vote me out of office. I mean, that's an actual conversation with a member of the Bundestag. So that got sold there. Then it was sold at nearly the same time to the Democrats in this country, and the voice was AOC. Which I'll just say, I said, this is one of the cross-wired brain spark of AOC, only she didn't think of it. It came to her, and she became the mouthpiece, and then we needed Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to pull that together with a trifecta. And then they tried to pass the Build Back Better plan, and that failed, longer story, so they plugged it into the Inflation Reduction Act, one of the most misnamed pieces of legislation ever to come out of Congress, but they plugged it in there, and that raised the values of the carbon credits, and now here we are with these billionaires wanting to become trillionaires at the expense of we the people. That's the summary of it. And so what can we accomplish today? We can identify each other. And I want you to mingle during the break times and exchange contact information. We need county supervisors working together. We need state legislators across state lines working together. County supervisors across state lines working together. We need landowners that are networked and working together. We're going to need more plaintiffs and landowners, because as we fight this thing through, and I'm going to challenge you this, we need to fight it every single step of the way. Pass no battle up. Don't isolate a chance to fight. Go in there and fight them everywhere, in every county, every way that you can. Bog this thing down as hard as you can. Back this thing up to the Utilities Board. The Utilities Board itself, a couple more words on that. 2 people on that Utilities Board can make the decision. They've been granted this authority by the state legislature to hand over the right to condemn your property. The Founding Fathers would have never imagined such a thing for any reason, to unelected people condemning your property without a responsibility. And so that the Utilities Board needs to face, I'll say, serious criticism for the circumstances that they set in. 2 of those members were appointed in the last month of the General Assembly, and they were confirmed in the same week. One of them with a 50-0 vote, and the legislators I talked to knew nothing about her. They didn't do their due process, but I know, due diligence, but I know the governor did. And so I'll just leave that part there for now. But the network that we need to build is this 5 or 6 states, actually 6 states, network together. The people that came down from the Dakotas, the people that came across the river from Nebraska, the ones that may be here from Minnesota that haven't met yet, or Illinois that I don't know haven't met yet, and all of you that are here today, find those people you can be most effective with. Sign up for all the things that you can and will do here today, and reach out to others to recruit more. And if we do this, and we do this right, then we can bog them down all along the way. And every step of the way is building a case for us where eventually I think it ends up. And that's this, they're looking at $17 billion a year from we the people to pay them after they set up a monopoly access to the highest volume and highest quality CO2 anywhere in the world. That's what they're looking at. They'll spend $17 billion and more to try to trample us the way they're doing. So we have to be an army, and we have to stand on principle, just as Larry's prayer says. And so I'm exhilarated to see your faces here today. I haven't been able to let up for 6 months or more. My wife told me I was retired. That now she understands that I'm not happy that way. I'm happy this way. And before I close this and hand this back to Cindy, too, I want to introduce a couple of people. One of them is Congressman Ted Yoho here from Florida. Flew in last night. Stand up, please, Ted. They need to know here. Get to know Ted. I served with Ted 8 years. He is a man of principle all the way through, even to the extent it broke my heart when he kept his promise to only serve 8 years. He gave up a very safe seat and access to me. No, he's terrific, and I hope you get to know him. His head and his heart is where we are. And then wherever Katie Koppel is, I wanted to mention that too. Katie, will you stand up and wave over there? Okay, there's Katie Koppel. I wanted to thank Katie. She's been reporting on this for months now at KMEG. KMEG's more or less shut down their news operation, and Katie will be starting up next week, early next week, with Monday the 10th of July, KTIV, the large station out of Sioux City, and she's taken on the job of the chronicling this through the news media, and it's a balanced approach. We welcome that because we're right. We want a balanced approach. And so I wanted to talk to Katie if you get the chance to do that. She's going to do some interviews today too. I'm on a number of other media here, but I wanted to make those two introductions. I wanted to challenge you to draw everything from this you can today, and out of this is the day you can see energy in this room, but we need to take this energy and the knowledge base that's here, build on it, and launch it out across the countryside in 6 states. And I'll do all I can do, but that's my pledge, and you're here to do what you can do, and that's all you can do, and recruit others for the same. So on with the program, Cindy. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Next we have Iowa Representative Mark Thompson, South Dakota Representatives Carla Lem and Julie Auk, and North Dakota State Senator Jeff Magrum, and Representative Sue Ann Olson. So if you guys would like to come up, I got to go grab a pen here. I'll give you this.
Are they all supposed to come up here now, Cindy? Okay, great. While everybody's coming up here, I have some prepared remarks that I'm going to try and be as concise as possible with. It's always bad to start with an excuse, but 45 and a half years ago, I was in this building. It was in the middle of a blizzard. It was the night of my wedding. I was supposed to be in Des Moines with my wife. My wife and I decided that if you couldn't see a hood ornament on your car due to the snow, maybe you should stop. So this was where we were 45 and a half years ago. Anyway, I won't go in any more detail. But thank you for being here. I often have nice people approach me and thank me for my service. I have recognized that service is much more than the military. Gone are the days when we can sit in the proverbial bleachers and be armchair quarterbacks. We must be in the arena to make a difference. What we're trying to accomplish today is to figure out a game plan inside that arena. Thanks for providing the very limited commodity you have called time and sharing your wisdom with us in the next few hours. We should conclude that we, in fact, are the people we've been waiting for. I know there will be several speakers who will be getting into the nuts and bolts of what we're trying to do here, so I won't get into too much now. I will not get long-winded here, and I'll cede my time to the people who are truly experts. But we just finished our nation's independence birthday. My wife and I decided to read the Declaration last Tuesday, and we were reminded of the many usurpations, as they say, of the King of England. The colonies had endured decades of abuse by the king and his army, and the Declaration mentions many of those abuses. Some of those included laws enacted, who were ignoring the laws enacted by the states, protecting government officials from being held accountable, denying citizens trial by jury. These are very familiar, unfortunately. When we really take a hard look at our Constitution, we recognize, as Patrick Henry did, that it is not a restraint on the people. It is an instrument to restrain the government, particularly those amendments embodied in the Bill of Rights. That truth has been turned on its head. This idea that we submit to unelected officials is certainly unconstitutional. Last year's West Virginia versus EPA Supreme Court decision was an example of those unelected officials being held in check. That decision is a good sign in my view. Those of us who have served in the military recall that the first time we took our oath to the Constitution, we swore an oath to protect our constitutional republic from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I must admit I never thought about a domestic threat when I was 18. I do now. Congressman King's very complete synopsis on this fallacy is an excellent resource for this topic that he's written lately, and I highly recommend it, but he was too humble to say it. The story is found in the Gateway Pundit. It's called The Title of a Boondoggle, The Green New Deal versus a Family Farm. I'm happy to share that link with you later. The Iowa House was able to pass a bill called House File 565 this past session. Steve Holt from Denison may already be here, and he floor managed the bill. That vote was 73-20 to require 90% easement threshold prior to the IUB considering any eminent domain. As most know, Republicans currently hold a 64-36 majority. So this was much more than a symbolically bipartisan. It was not all, it was not all of what many of us wanted, but it was the best we could get at the time, and it's a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, the bill was never considered by the Senate. I'll let the senators who are here today offer their views when appropriate. In my view, future steps should include taking the power away from the IUB to invoke eminent domain and return that final decision to the legislature. I was also struck the other day in visiting a farm near me where the Secretary of Agriculture was there, and he talked about, with this young farmer, about the concern about carbon index score. So I'm looking at a Secretary of Agriculture and a young farmer who are coming to an agreement that we have a carbon problem. Therein lies why we're here, or at least the excuse why we're here. And Congressman King's already talked about the fact that it's about trillions of dollars. It's not necessarily about whether we're going to all suffocate from carbon. So we have to push back on that silliness to begin with when we hear it, that this carbon index score is a given and that we just have to salute smartly and get in line. So I think, again, another place we can push back on this issue. I also heard a woman in Hancock County who was accused of being an environmental terrorist for not supporting the pipeline. That sometimes is called projection, when someone blames a person for the same infraction they themselves are committing. It also illustrates either the arrogance or the ignorance of the one projecting. Regardless, again, we must push back on this lunacy. Money is always a hard topic to discuss, but I'm going to mention it. I will simply say that the people who put this together, as Congressman King said, worked countless hours above and beyond their day jobs, and they all have day jobs. They somehow still put this comprehensive gathering together. That level of effort cannot be sustained by those same people in the future. So moving forward, we will need a person whose sole focus is to coordinate and synergize all the elements of this critical and historic issue. And we'll need to provide him or her a salary. If you're so inclined, please consider donating in order that we keep this effort going, or perhaps help us find someone who is willing and able to do the same. Again, thank you for your commitment to be here today. Many of you drove many, many miles. We appreciate it. And thank you for answering the basic questions of, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? We need all of you in this critical fight. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. I have on my schedule here, South Dakota is next, so I'll let you guys decide who's going to go first. And you can tell us a little bit about how you got involved.
You bet. Okay. Well, I'll just read it because I wrote it last night. So great to see all of you here. We just finished a rally in South Dakota, and I'll let Carla tell you about it. It's very exciting. This is my first year serving in South Dakota legislature, not on my bucket list to be a representative, not politically involved, nothing. But I was mad. You need to get mad because it gets you motivated. I ran because a representative in my district thought it was okay to kill babies that were born after a botched abortion. And I just felt like this is not who we are in District 18. So I threw my hat in. I mean, it was like, I cannot believe I'm doing this, but you know, sometimes God calls us to do things and we do it. We listen. And I pledged to ensure that our children and grandchildren would inherit the legacy we in South Dakota have long enjoyed. Civil liberties, second right amendments, private property rights, pro-life legislation, rule of law, free speech, religious freedom. Julie Auk for House, God, family, country. That was my motto. And I have been following Joe Biden's executive order 14008 that he signed as into executive order, which is not law, January 27, 2021, tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. Since he signed in 2021, otherwise known as the 30 by 30, an international agenda advanced by radical environmental activists to permanently protect 30% of the world's land and waters in their natural state by 2030. The program is now called America the Beautiful. Boy, that really sounds great. You may have seen this information regarding it in your FSA office. I served on the FSA board for 11 years in our county, and they are pushing this. The 30 by 30 is an unconstitutional policy shift, moving us from a nation founded on private property principles to one controlled by an administrative state. My husband and I were at the Turner County Fair, met Carla for the first time, running for office also, stopped at her booth. She told me about the battle in Lincoln County with the CO2 pipeline. I also told her I was a candidate, the whole time thinking, here we go, this is how they are going to get started. I could not even have imagined how all of this has come to be. I was one of those people that just didn't know. It doesn't affect us. It's not in our area yet. My husband and I farm in the southeast corner of South Dakota, and we are fourth generation farmers and ranchers. Karl Marx himself told us that the theory of the communist may be summed up in one single sentence: abolition of private property. The definition of freedom: the capacity to choose in the absence of coercion. Definition of independence: the product of freedom and responsibility. It almost feels like we skipped right over socialism and right on to communism. My husband Gary is here today with me. He doesn't come very often on my events, but it rained, so we're happy. Yay. So he couldn't put up his hay. We also are blessed with 4 children. Our son Cody just got married on June 3rd, and he's a power lineman here in Iowa. Our daughter lives 20 minutes from us, along with 4 grandchildren. Our middle son lives on a parcel of farm ground on our farm with 3 more of our grandchildren, and our youngest serves this country in the U.S. Army. That is why we fight. If we did not have our faith, family, and the Constitution awarded us in this country, we would be like every other communist country, like China, ESG scores and all. Why? That's why they're knocking down our borders to come here. There is no place else to go for freedom. I truly believe this is a long, well thought out plan, just like you said. They've been thinking about this for a long time. 30 by 30 has been in the works globally for at least 20 plus years. As far as we can tell, The legislation in South Dakota has been lined up to this since 2012. These people are patient and they are deviant. They do not care about you, your family, and they do not care about your land. They want it. This pipeline is part of it. They need to shut off the production of food. And what? CO2? 10 keys you need to know about the 30 by 30 program. It is an advanced, radically environmental activist program. Pushed by the Biden administration, use politically motivated climate crisis. There is no credible scientific reasoning to it. 36% of the U.S. is already owned by the federal and state government. And we were driving over here and we're like, why don't they put those doggone windmills on their own property? Why are they putting it on ours? Their crisis math does not add up. Global crop yields have set new records almost every year. They can't excuse that away. They cannot. U.S. crop yields have continued to grow, setting new records nearly every year. For goodness sake, CO2 is needed to grow food. Explain why CO2 is pumped into large greenhouses. They pump it into greenhouses to help entice growth. There is no constitutional or statutory authority for the President, the Department of Interior, or the Department of Ag to set aside and preserve 30% of all land and water in the U.S. The only way they can do it is because we let them. They want to remove local government veto power over federal land acquisitions. So much for this only affecting farmers. The politicians will not have their land seized. Did you know that? You know what? You take that pipeline and put it around my new housing development. You know, you're not here, only for the little people. International goal, half Earth to permanently conserve 50% of our lands and waterways by 2050. They claim to be concerned about the welfare of the species and the habitat, like in Denmark, where the farmers were ordered to sell half their livestock to protect a native plant. America's landowners are the best stewards of land, not the government. I serve on a grassroots organization called Families Feeding Families in Yankton. And we started because we had a group of individuals headed by the Sierra Club, and I'm not going to badmouth them because I know they might be a little bit helping us a little bit here, but they were coming after our hog operations and our hog barns. And so I've been touting this for years, and they all thought I was wearing a tinfoil hat. Boy, I think they're all wearing tinfoil hats now, too. So this is real. Are the owners of Summit and Navigator or any other pipeline aware of the 30 by 30? Maybe not, but they are part of the plan. Take your land, control it so you cannot grow food. And why else would they force easement rights right through the middle of farms, through cattle lots, 500 feet from homes? They may not know the end game, but they are a piece of the overall goal. The 30 by 30 agenda, Green New Deal, it's here. And if your legislators are not paying attention to it, vote them out of office. We are a republic in South Dakota. That's right. Get rid of them. In South Dakota, our state motto is, under God, the people rule. I do believe most of our legislators have forgotten that. They are not the only people living in South Dakota. We are. We live in South Dakota, and they serve us. The Iowa motto is, our liberties we prize, our rights we will maintain. I am thinking some of your legislators forgot that too. The meaning of liberties and rights. On a very cold morning in January of this year, my husband and I drove to the Capitol in Pierre, and I solemnly swore that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of South Dakota, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of representative according to the best of my abilities, and that I have not knowingly or unintentionally paid or contributed anything or made any promise in the nature of a bribe to directly or indirectly influence any vote at the election at which I was chosen to fill said office. I have not accepted, nor will I accept or receive directly or indirectly any money, pass, or any other valuable thing from any corporation, company, or person for any vote or influence I may give or withhold on any bill or resolution or appropriation or for any other official act. raised my right hand, and I swore to that. This oath is not for my benefit. It is for the people of South Dakota. I have never taken the oath lightly. You need to hold your legislators' feet to the fire. They work for you and your interests, not the lobbyists. If they are getting big campaign donations from Summit or Navigator, call them out. Carla and I both have said, I do not care what the other legislators want or the lobbyists want. I will do what is right in the eyes of God. We are called for a purpose. We are called to serve someone or something. Who are we serving? This is a battle. I don't want it. I don't like it. Carla didn't want it. She doesn't like it either. But we are here. 2 Timothy 4, verse 7, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Keep the faith, good people. Never, never, never give up. This is our land. This is our God-given right. Fight. And like I said, if your legislators aren't doing their job, call them out. Pay attention. Pay attention to what's happening in your legislation. It's work, but they need to be held accountable. They serve us. They serve you. Okay.
Thank you, Julie. Carla is next, and what I want to say is I am a freshman legislator as well, as was Mark Thompson, and it is such a pleasure to serve with people. None of us planned to do this. We are doing it because we're convicted. We feel that God hit us upside the head and said, you have to do this. It wasn't on my bucket list either. I have 21 grandkids that I was planning on spending time with. So, there you go.
Very good. I will tell you, it is just such a privilege to be here today. I thank all of you for coming. I will just say, along with Julie, it's a privilege to serve. It's really nothing that we were looking for, but here we are. And I will say, if you can get other conservatives that will go to the mat for you, try to get them into office and encourage them to run. We need more people. We have a good group of conservatives in South Dakota legislature, but we don't have enough. And we actually lost our leadership positions this year with our conservatives. And so, yes, we are very heavily Republican, but that does not always mean that we're conservative Republicans, constitutional Republicans. So anyway, we only have 7 Democrats in the House in South Dakota, along with 63 Republicans. And so you would think that we are a bright red state, as bright as the red that I have on right here. It's not true. We are more like a pink state, and we're getting more diluted all the time, I would say. Of course, we keep inviting everybody to come to South Dakota, or our governor does. We get some good people that move there, but, you get a mix. And as the cities continue to grow, we all know what happens. So we become more blue. So I just wanted to start out today. I don't have my speech typed out, so you guys are just going to have to go like this when my 10 minutes are up. I wanted to say the big overall theme of this, and I'm sure that others will be touching on this. I'm not going to go into the whole big picture. But at the very, very tippy top of this whole thing, this is good versus evil. That is the end game, guys. And, yep. And I just wanted to mention Proverbs 11:1. Dishonest scales are an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. Well, I will tell you what, they are stacking the deck like none other with this boondoggle. And it is taking our own money out of our back pocket when we write that check to the IRS and it goes to Washington. And bless Biden's heart, he had the Inflation Reduction Act, which just upped the ante. It was already there, but it just upped the ante more. And so much that these companies could not turn it down. And they're like, we've got to go for this. And I will say, as I look through the law in South Dakota, they have set this thing up over a number of years to make everything is in place, the survey laws, the eminent domain laws, everything, and so that they could just come through and do what they wanted to do. And I looked across state lines over into Iowa, looked up into North Dakota, visited with Senator Magrum. I know I was on a call with you before. And similar things were happening in all three states. And it was almost surreal to see it all roll out the way that it did. I had a bill in HB 1133 in South Dakota, and it addressed this very issue of the carbon dioxide pipelines, and basically because of the common carrier law in South Dakota. Now, the common carrier in South Dakota, if you are a common carrier, you can use eminent domain. And so there's another law that said if a pipeline company comes in and holds themselves out, it doesn't mean they're already in business. It holds themselves out to the public as transporting commodities for hire, then they are a common carrier. So if you are under consideration, they have to go before the PUC, they have to ask for a siting permit, and during that process, they are considered a common carrier, and common carriers can use eminent domain. And so they already, in South Dakota, we have well over 100 landowners that have been served condemnation papers at this point. We are not permitted yet in our state, and so those proceedings will begin. We have Navigator and Summit coming through. I myself, our family has both pipelines coming through our property, so I can very much relate to some of you who are landowners. But all that being said, I carried a bill, HB 1133, and it basically said, it defined what a commodity was. So it went along right with that law that I just read to you, that pipelines holding themselves out to the public for transporting commodities for hire. And then my bill went on to say a commodity is something for commerce, something for trade, something we're going to use, right? And it is not something that is going to be sequestered underground or use 45Q tax credits. So that bill passed in the House 40-28. We had two people gone that day, and both of them had indicated to me that they would have voted for the bill, so we would have had 42. Went over to the Senate House and Energy Committee, and it was killed 9-0. Just, and, you can read the room. And we had I think 140 landowners there during session with several different bills on this topic. And what was very shocking to me, and it was not only on the pipeline bills, but when I got to Pierre, I noticed something, and I noticed this. I noticed that the red carpet was rolled out for the lobbyists. It was rolled out for organizations, business organizations, and the common man, the citizen, when they showed up to testify, they were looked at with disdain. They were not treated with respect. And it was so disturbing to me because of this, because our South Dakota Constitution and our Bill of Rights, right here, Article 6, Section 1 says, inherent rights, all men are born equally free and independent, and have certain inherent rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring and protecting property, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Well, guess what? That is your elected officials. That is why they are there, to represent the rights of the citizens. So governments are instituted among men, and where do we derive our just powers as we govern? We derive our just powers from the consent of the governed. So every time I get up in front anymore, now we're fighting this fight at every level. We're at the county commission level, we're in the township levels, we're doing these rallies, we're having grassroots events like this. And even in front of the legislature, it's like this I use this on the House floor, because we have to remind our elected officials again and again and again, why are you here? You are here. We give you the right to govern, okay? And we have to remember that, and especially as Republicans, guys, we are so busy, we are out doing our jobs, we are working hard, that is who we are. But we had better get involved because we are losing our country. And that really is the bottom line. And I will say, when I ran for office, I actually announced in our Lincoln County Republican Party meeting, that's when I announced I was going to run. And I actually, you know, it was kind of a party atmosphere, and it's always good to get together with like-minded people and have fun. But it was so heavy on my heart. We were coming out of COVID. You know, we had seen what happened in the 2020 election, and I was so disturbed, and that is really why I decided to run. And I'm going to say this, I also saw there were issues within our own Republican Party, because you know what? We do not hold other Republicans accountable, and that has got to change. So I got up there and I said, I announced I was going to run, and I said, guys, we have a big problem here, and we might as well just say it. We are dealing with communism, and it is coming into our country, and I know a lot of them probably rolled their eyes and was like, oh boy, here we go, you know. But it's true, and this is part of it. And you don't think, I mean, we know that the CCP is involved in this project. We know, and I'm sure other people are going to be touching on this, there are foreign governments involved, and it is very concerning as they are crisscrossing the heartland of the United States of America, the breadbasket that we feed the world, and they are going to have the right to come through that property at any time that they want, and they can even sell that easement. Well, who's going to buy it? I wonder who's going to be waiting in the wings to buy that up. So anyway, I know I'm running out of time here, but this is a boondoggle. I'm going to close with this. I'm going to read you the letter that I wrote to Governor Noem that was sent to her on April 17th, and there were 22 legislators that signed on. Sorry, I'm going to have to read it off of my phone because I couldn't get my computer to pull this up today, but Honorable Governor Noem, we, the undersigned state representatives and senators, are writing to urge your support of South Dakota landowners. The undue attack on the private property rights of our citizens is an affront to the South Dakota Constitution. The CO2 pipelines continue to forge ahead, embracing the World Economic Forum goal of net zero by 2050. However, we in South Dakota and Iowa, we live by a different set of rules. South Dakota Bill of Rights, inherent rights, all men are born equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights, among which of those are enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring and protecting property, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, and we affirm the following. The Green New Deal that has been thrust upon South Dakota due to the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals does not fit with our Bill of Rights. And I will just say, someone sent to me not long ago, Summit Carbon Solutions is actually listed now on that UN 17 Sustainable Goal site. The false narrative that says ESG scores tied to the net zero carbon score will repair the damage caused by capitalism goes against the very nature of our founders. Companies that stand to benefit from these projects do so at the expense of the property rights of the individuals. In addition to that, they use the very tax dollars paid by these individuals to put in corporate pockets through the 45Q tax credit. This is theft and covetousness, i.e. private gain, not public good. The safety of our South Dakota citizens, as well as their land values and future plans, is in jeopardy. PHMSA is currently overhauling its rules for CO2 pipelines, so extreme caution is needed to ensure the well-being of our people. A letter from Summit Carbon Solutions has been received from some landowners in their path that they will be executing condemnation within 10 days. Navigator Heartland Greenway also has plans to implement eminent domain from when they deem necessary. Therefore, time is of the essence. So, Governor Noem, we know that you have a history of standing up for landowner rights, have raised your voice on behalf of what is best for South Dakota. When you were a citizen and were in disbelief that the federal government was coming after your family, you fought back. Your father said, "Don't sell the land, Christy. God's not making any more of it." Many landowners in this state feel the same way about this project. You have come out fighting against foreign adversaries investing in South Dakota land. SKENS is one investor in Summit Carbon Solutions that was fined over $70 million for defrauding U.S. military contracts. BlackRock is a major investor in Navigator. In 2022, there were 19 state attorney generals that wrote to the Security and Exchange Commission asking the agency to look into BlackRock's ties to China. BlackRock appears to use the hard-earned money of our state citizens to circumvent the best possible return on investment, as well as their vote, the AG said in their letter. And last month, you were one of 19 governors leading the nation by issuing a joint statement calling ESG's direct threat to the American economy, individual economic freedom, and our way of life. While ESG represents an expanding threat to our ag industry, that threat is now being passed to the farmers, ranchers, and individual property owners that have kept that industry profitable. You took a stand with 16 other state governors, signing a letter addressed to President Biden with a warning against the potential overreach of the 30 by 30 land grab. These CO2 pipelines are another form of the land grab that is taking the right of acquiring and protecting property away from the citizens. So, we, the undersigned, now ask you to raise your voice once again in support of South Dakota landowners. Please stand with them and us against that which threatens to scar our land and risk our freedoms. There are solutions to these problems. Please lead not only South Dakota but the Midwest in finding a better way. And I will close with, the moment the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the law of God, and that there is not a force of law and public justice to protect it, anarchy and tyranny will commence. John Adams. So, we just had a landowner-led rally in Pierre 2 days ago. We had, well, Trent Lewis was there, and I believe we had over 700 people. So, we had the landowners. What I have seen with this whole thing, if there is one good thing that has come of it, courage has arisen within the heart of the men and women of the Midwest. And we are raising up. Okay, we're not going to be silent anymore, and we can't be, because we see that our elected officials are not doing anything. They may say that they're with us, but until we see action, they're not. They're not. And I call on Kim Reynolds. I call on these people that have ran on these values, and if this is truly who they are at the heart of their being, they will do something. So we are asking them to do something, and I continue to ask you to do something, because really, it's going to lay at the feet of the people. And we're going to have to do this together, guys. And I am so glad you're here today. I just ask you to continue on. I know it's tiring, but together we are strong. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have North Dakota, and I want to encourage you, like you're hearing, it starts at your community. We need to let our communities, as farmers, as landowners, that we don't have enough votes to change it. People in the communities need to know how dangerous this is. So you guys, who wants to go first? So they're from North Dakota. Representative Sue Ann Olson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My story is very much like the others. I'm a brand-new legislator and just felt called upon to do this thing. At first, I was telling my young adult sons, guys, you need to get involved. Is it really working? I don't know. Yeah, it's working. Finally, I heard myself talking and said, well, what about me? And I think lots of people have started looking at themselves and going, what about me? But by trade, I'm a CPA. Worked a long time consulting, actually, with lots of oil and gas service-related companies. And the thing I want to really talk about is the great big empty pocket that nobody notices. My background as a CPA, everything is an LLC. Summit is an LLC. Many of you have formed LLCs. And why is that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that there's a single layer of taxation. We've all liked that. It helps save money that way. But there's also great flexibility, and the most important one, limited liability. So when you look at what we've done, and this all occurred in the 90s mostly, and all of us had our hats on when we're just thinking about certainly, our own state, our own whatever we're doing, our own country. We didn't envision that some of the owners of LLCs would be foreigners. And at the time, the beauty was of an LLC is like, well, nobody needs to know your business. They don't need to know who the owners of an LLC are. You could kind of hide behind that shield. Well, in my view, that has come back to bite us in a very big way, because now we don't really know who we're dealing with. It's been very difficult. That's been part of what has been tried to be sought, is who are the owners of Summit and Navigator, all of these, and it is layer upon layer to get down to who the true owners are. So from Summit's standpoint, they're off their own website. They project they would get about $1.5 billion of the 45Q tax credit every year for 12 years. And the flexibility of an LLC allows them to allocate things like the credit in an unequal way if they so desire. I mean, if you can write it in an LLC document, you can do it. And so what I could envision when you just start thinking about how this could happen, 5 of the 12 years of this credit can simply be paid in cash by the government. Normally most tax credits, you have to have some U.S. income tax that the credit would offset. This is not true with this credit. So let's say if we have foreign investors who otherwise don't have U.S. income tax, they can say, well, I'll take the credit, those dollars, in the years that we're requesting it in cash. So, I mean, there would be lots of ability to really finagle what's happening. And when and again, as an LLC, that all of us, if you've ever been involved in forming one, typically in an LLC, all you can lose is your original investment. So even if this thing would go horribly wrong, the owners of Summit really have nothing to lose but whatever money they put in originally. All there is a big empty pocket for all of the people that may have lost their lives, may have lost property. There will be no one to look to. On Summit's website, one of their subsidiaries is called Summit Agricultural Group, and they tout some of the investments that they have been in and out of to private equity investors. They note on there that several investments, people were in there for 5 years and then out. So again, when I just think of how this LLC is likely to work, yep, they've gone and gotten a bunch of private investors who will largely, most likely, be in it for the 12 years of the credit, and they will be gone. What will be left is somebody will be the shell, but again, nobody to turn to that would stand behind it, that would be liable. Most of us, when we think of the public utility arena, we're thinking of our power companies. In North Dakota, it would be, for example, MDU Resources. You can drive by their office building. You know who they are. You have somebody to turn to if there's a problem with a project they have. But in Summit, there will be no brick and mortar to go to. There will be no one to turn to when things go bad. If we don't really find out who this is, it'll be shame on us that we don't know who we're dealing with. And I think that will be very important for how we go forward. Even the federal government has recognized that foreign ownership is a problem. It was early 21, they passed a law called the Corporate Transparency Act. So starting next year in 24, the feds are now requiring that all kinds of ownership groups, corporations, LLCs, whatever, for the most part are going to have to report their owners to the federal government. And most of the states are running a little bit behind on getting that same information. North Dakota passed a couple of things that will start getting us there and trying to rein in foreign ownership. But we need to know who we're dealing with. And if your state hasn't already started looking at that, now it's become easier, because most states would go, well, the Secretary of State doesn't know how they would go about finding out who the owners are. Well, now we have the feds already requesting that same information. It makes it easier for all of the states to tag along and get that information as well. But it is absolutely true that a lot of these dollars that are coming out of our tax dollars are going to land in the pockets of foreign governments. You know, we know that China is involved, South Korea appears to be involved, Saudi Arabia. We don't know who else. It's been very difficult to get the information. So again, I would say we need to get on this. We need to question why the urgency. You know, they are acting like this thing has to get permitted just absolutely. And the answer why is the longer this thing hangs out, the less likely it will be to get approved. The credit actually just, I mean, you know, I would respond, there isn't, what is the urgency here? These projects are eligible for the credit as long as they are started by January 1st of 2033, essentially 10 years from now. There is not some time clock going on that we have to get this done, you know, in the next 6 months. But that is the feeling you're getting. That is the urgency that is coming across. That for us, it's the Public Service Commission. Everybody has a different name in their state. Like, we have to get on this. We have to make a ruling. And I'm like, why? Why isn't there time to fully lay this out, find out what's going on, understand the risks? District 8, which Jeff and I represent, is Emmons County, then comes up, which is on the South Dakota border up towards Bismarck, and then our district swings around Bismarck and goes north of Bismarck. We are exactly where that 24-inch pipe is coming that would then cross the Missouri River to its endpoint. Tremendous number of people that can be at risk given just the geography. If there's something bad to happen. I've got pictures of a very small line in Montana that I'm sure the builder of that CO2 pipeline didn't intend for it to leak either. But some of the pictures look like the moon, you know, big craters and whatnot that have happened on a guy's ranch. And again, they could say, well, of course. I mean, I'm sure, again, these people wouldn't have said, oh, no, you know, this is absolutely safe. It's not going to leak. But it did. And a 24-inch pipe that we're talking about here is a very different animal than just about any other pipeline you would talk about. So I appreciate so very much that all of you are here. Yeah, this is a fight that we're in for the long haul. And our legislature as well does not understand the urgency of property rights. And I'm sitting here thinking, and we only meet every other year. We missed our opportunity this last session. We will not be in session again until 25. Thank you.
Before I hand this over to Jeff, I'm going to have to wait just a second. Steve Holt, Representative Steve Holt is here. Steve, would you stand up? He is our hero in the Iowa House. Steve floor managed House File 565 for us. So, Steve, thank you very much. Like I said, he's our hero in Iowa. And Jeff, you're going to have to wait just a second for Steve. This Steve.
Thanks for indulging me here. First, I want to say before a senator steps up, you've raised some of the issue about the Chinese investment in this, and I've dug into it a bit myself. So we took a little bit, we took a little bit of trouble to help illustrate this for your speech today, and I'm going to turn this to the crowd in a minute, but I think you see the senator's reaction. There is Chinese investment in this, and the lead people are on this poster. So we had this made up so you could all see how this actually works. And you'll notice the caricatures of Larry Fink, who I haven't heard his name yet, the CEO of BlackRock, controlling $10 trillion, and I'll say the cook in the kitchen at the World Economic Forum along with Klaus Schwab. He's been pushing this for about 20 years altogether. He's invested in China, and he's rooted deeply in China. You recognize the ambassador to China. He gets adamant if you disagree with him on what ought to happen to our tax dollars and our property rights. And the other fellow is Bruce Rastetter, the head of Summit. So we just had to put this together so you could all see it, and I'm going to think it's going to help Jeff's speech. So anyway.
Thank you, Steve. And Jeff, here you go.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, thank you. You was Mr. King, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to introduce
Yeah, sorry I didn't get to meet you earlier, but yeah. So and And I'd like to thank everyone, Tammy for putting this event on, and Trent Luce for calling and saying, Jeff, you need to get down here. We need to get everybody together. And so, are we ready to win this thing or what? Cool. They think we're all just going to lay down and they're going to run over us, but we're not going to let that happen. And I can see there's a lot of people here that took the time, and I'm really impressed by that. And there's so much to talk about, and I've learned so much myself in the last year. As Representative Sue Ann Olson, she's from our home district of District 8, where there's approximately 60 to 63 miles of the 24-inch line at 2100 PSI going through our district. And our district drops right around Bismarck, the east side and the north side of Bismarck, North Dakota, our capital city, of course. And so we asked them early on if they would look at a different route, and they said no. So I had 8 bills that we introduced in the Senate in North Dakota, and 2 of them did make it to the House, and they got clobbered over there. But the lobby is so powerful right now, and we, in North Dakota, we need campaign finance reform. But, I mean, the lobby is just, it was just unbelievable. We had 3 to 4 lobbyists per legislator this year, and they surrounded them. And I don't take PAC money, and I think the guy that was talking earlier about bribes, you know, you could probably call PAC money a bribe, although many, I know it's expensive to run a campaign, so it's, you know, people need the money in a way, but, you know, I'm seeing the negative now, especially this session. And so, house in Burley County, you better get a permit, you better follow their ordinances. So why should Summit Carbon be able to come in and negate all their? So this pipeline crosses through, and it crosses the river, and it goes to the west side over in the Beulah, North Dakota area. And that's what they call a disposal area of about 135,000 acres. And so in that 135,000 acres, under North Dakota law, if they get 60% of the landowners to sign up, the other 40% have to be a part of the project. So that is totally unconstitutional, because eminent domain, believe it or not, is constitutional, but you always have the right to a trial by a jury. So your peers will be the ones to judge it, not some corrupt judge that's probably paid off by Summit as well. So that's the beauty of it. So what Northwest Landowners did last month is file a lawsuit against the state of North Dakota. Our governor, Doug Burgum, who I seen on your TV this morning, running for president asking for your votes. Beware of that guy. He is a big part of this scheme. So anyway, and it's him, our Attorney General, Drew Wrigley, and our Ed Commissioner, Doug Gehring, who are in this lawsuit because they compromise our North Dakota Industrial Commission. And they are in charge of the disposal area. Our Public Service Commission is in charge of the pipeline, but when it goes to the disposal area, it switches to a different board, and so that North Dakota Industrial Commission is being sued now by the Northwest Landowners, and we won the case a couple years ago where there was a movement by the lobbyists to make it so that these companies, whether they're storing natural gas, salt water, whatever, in the pore space in North Dakota, if you own the surface, you own to the center of the earth. And all the pore spaces, caverns, caves, whatever's down there is yours. And they made a move, passed a bill, which I strongly opposed, and of course I became a target then, but the goal was to use that pore space free of charge by these companies. And so the Northwest Landowners sued, and it went to the Supreme Court, and the Northwest Landowners won the case, and they said, that is a hostile taking of property. They considered it hostile, so they reversed it, and these companies, oil companies and so on, had to go back and pay these landowners. And then now we already won the preliminary case, So now this case, I'm sure is going to be a slam dunk because the two go together. So that amalgamated area, that 40%, there's some landowners in there that don't want to be a part of that project. So what we're doing is suing the state in hopes of making that, turning it into a constitutional issue where these companies literally have to file eminent domain on these landowners so that at least the landowner doesn't have to sue the state, which is an insurmountable task to come in and sue the state. This way the companies will have to sue the landowner. They'll get the right of eminent domain at least and get in front of a trial of a jury of their peers. So that's the goal of that. And so I don't understand how they're going to be able to build this pipeline to an area where the disposal area is in question. So I don't know where this is going right now because the press has been very quiet about, they haven't really been covering the lawsuit by the Northwest Landowners, but you can check it out. Northwest Landowners is out of Williston area, and it's a pretty big deal. I think this is probably the biggest part that's going to slow the project down because, like I said, they can't hardly issue building permits for a pipeline that goes nowhere. So anyway, so that's the big news there, and there's a lot to talk about. We had a lot of different bills that would have preempted this project, and as Sue Ann said, we don't meet it for another year and a half, and so there's nothing we can do till then anyway. And I don't know what we know we're going to win. We just don't know how the victory is going to look. So I'm very encouraged by this group. I'm thankful to be here with you guys, and if anybody wants to reach out to me, if you want, we had the press conference where we had 32 legislators sign on to the letter to ask our Attorney General to investigate the investors. There's 464 investors, and there's only 5 disclosed by Bruce Rastetter and his Summit Carbon people. And so we need to know, are these people Chinese agents? Because they're working with the Chinese, we know that, to bring them in. And there's so many questions that should be answered. One thing is, these 99-year in South Dakota, I think they're perpetual easements, and this needs to be answered maybe even nationally. Do I, as a landowner now that might live another 30 years, have the right to give up the property rights of people that aren't even born yet? I mean, we need to look at that issue. A 30-year contract I can see, but 99 in North Dakota is the most they can go, which is considered perpetual. So there's so many issues that need to be looked at that they really opened up a can of worms with this project. So we're not done, we're just starting, and there's a lot of people have been waking up in North Dakota. We have Burley County on board now, which is a huge county. Emmons, which my son is chairman of the Emmons County Commission, they're on board, but we're a very big county, but very rural. And so we have Bismarck Public Schools has gotten on board. We have the Bismarck City, which is Bismarck's approximately, I don't even know what is 65, 70,000 people roughly. Maybe 100 with the whole area there. But anyway, so we have a lot of, the grassroots opposition to this project is really growing. And people are really talking about it. As a matter of fact, I got a call this morning, our local highway 1804 that runs along the Missouri River, there's a culvert washing out on it apparently, and so the DOT people, Department of Transportation, were out working on it. I get a call from a lady I don't even know. She says, hey, they're digging down here by 1804. I wonder what's going on. I hope that's not them Summit people down here. I said, no, you can be assured there's problems with a culvert down there that they're checking out. So people are watching. I mean, the opposition is growing, so is Bruce Rastetter here by any chance? Yeah, well, just so he knows that the opposition is growing, the people are waking up, and we're not going to take this, we're not going to just let them run over our landowners. And those landowners that signed up, there's many of them regret their decision in our area. They wish they would have never signed up. They were threatened with eminent domain. They didn't know how it worked. They didn't do their due diligence and find out that you do get paid if you get eminent domain. They were telling them, if we come in eminent domain, you get nothing. We're going to run right through your land. They're like, well, they're offering $30 a foot, so I'm going to take it. Right now, they're up to about $1,100 per rod at 16.5 feet. We did just do it with your calculator. The number comes to $66.66 per foot. A lot of sixes in there. Thanks for your time, everyone. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Jeff. So as we look at this problem, like I said, we don't have enough landowners to change elections because, our numbers are low. But look in your packet. There's the carbon dioxide study. We need to start talking about kill zones. I live 1 mile from a nuclear power plant. And the nuclear power plants were installed and every year since then, so every year they have the dry run if there's a nuclear disaster, if there's a leak. Every morning, every Wednesday, the first Wednesday of every month, the alarms go to, they say this is just a test. With a nuclear power plant leak, there's warnings, there's safety issues. You can get medication if you have been exposed to nuclear radiation. With a CO2 pipeline rupture, there are seconds. There's a kill zone where if you are within feet of that pipeline rupture, you're dead. And I thought when we heard about the Satarsha, Mississippi rupture that happened, I thought that pipeline was right in town. When we went to the PHMSA meeting, we found out that it was nearly a mile away. Now, PHMSA, Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. They are under the Department of Transportation. So is the accident that was in East Pennsylvania, East Palestine, Ohio. And what have they done there? They still haven't declared it a disaster area, and that happened back in February. So if PHMSA is under the Department of Transportation, and that's how they respond to disasters, how do you think they're going to respond to a CO2 rupture? I mean, yeah, we're going to have body bags. So next up, I'm going to mention this. You see the signs up here? We have the no deadly carbon pipelines. We need to get our city people to understand that this isn't just about our land. It's about their safety. And until they understand that there is an absolute kill zone, and in my county, this pipeline is going past schools. It's going right past the town. It's going through Cedar Rapids from the ADM plant. So trying to get people to understand it is not a rural versus urban issue. This is not only eminent domain and property rights, but it is a huge safety issue. And until we can get those people to understand it, we're not going to have the numbers to change the votes in our senates. So we have to do that. Now these signs over here, no deadly carbon pipelines, they are available, $5 to $10 donation to the group that had them made. Who is collecting that? There's a box over there. So, oh, I see. The box says donations. So if you would like to take one of those signs, please kick in because they paid for them. They'd like to get more. And so we'll move on now to our next speaker. Oh, let me get my paper here. Thank you very much, legislators. We're going to move on to our next speaker. I appreciate all the work that you guys do. Our next speaker is an attorney and landowner, Carell Molnar.
I have a sign too.
Oh, great.
Maybe on a chair.
We can set this up. It says a farmer's prayer. Lord, bless this land you've given me. May I always know as I tend each crop and animal, you're the one that helps them grow. Grant me the strength and wisdom. Please protect me from all harm. And thank you, Lord, for this precious gift, the blessing of my farm.
Thank you, everybody. I feel very privileged to be here today. That sign has been in our kitchen for about 3 years. Found it in a little store in Missouri. I got a lot to go through. I'd rather sit down if that's okay.
Go right ahead.
I don't want to fall down, so.
Sit right there, because you got to be over
Okay, I got to be over this way. Okay,
Now hold your sign.
thank you. I'm a lawyer. My name is Carol Jean
Carol.
Milner Stein. It's just spelled funny. Every part of it's a little weird. But I'm a lawyer. I'm licensed in Minnesota and Iowa. I'm also a Lee County resident with my husband, who inherited a Century Farm. His great-grandfather bought it on October 31st, Halloween, 1901. And we're living there now in this little log cabin, and we are so happy to be here. We are ground zero for the pipelines, all 3 of them so far. We're not Summit yet, but all the ones that are coming in the future, New Star, Navigator. I'm here largely because of the meeting that I went to or that my husband and I went to, and 50 other people at the Iowa Utilities Board on May 6, 2023. I wanted to be sure, and we drove 4 miles to get to Des Moines, that the Iowa Board knew that Iowa statute, Iowa Code 479B, had been struck down and was deemed unconstitutional by a very brave judge in Clay County, Iowa. And I'm going to talk about that. They needed to know that. So, and at the same time, the governor had just replaced those 2 members of the boards that I think Congressman King had told us about. And that shocked me, because within days after that appointment, the New Star ammonia pipeline order came down that granted eminent domain against 2 property owners in Lee County. And I'm going to talk about that shortly, too. So there was some weird stuff going on, and this board needed to know what was happening. So 50-plus members, farm owners, landowners, were allowed to speak for 3 minutes apiece that morning. We first had a green screen, then we had a yellow screen, then we had a red screen. And of course, I was number 50 or 51. My husband was the last one. He's way more rational. But I was so mad when I got to the end of that, because I heard all these stories of all these brave people who were fighting. And the worst part of it all is they were begging the IUB board to listen to them. Begging, honestly begging. This is something the board is tasked to do, to protect Iowa farmers. But there they were begging. And then, at the end of the comment period, the board went into a closed session about Navigator, or with Navigator, but we weren't allowed to be there. And I thought, well, hey, this violates the open meeting rule, doesn't it? So I asked the Iowa Advocate, and she said, well, nobody's ever challenged it. So, this made me mad, okay? So I'm not going to be nice, you know that. I'm not going to do the Minnesota nice deal, and I'm not going to mince any words. I have had revelations today, talking to wonderful people in this group that I didn't know before. But I'm going to tell you the way I see it, as a landowner, as a lawyer, as a resident of Iowa. There were 14 points that I made at that meeting on May 6th, and I'm going to go through them real quick because I only had 3 minutes, but I don't want to take your lunch hour away. Okay, so the first thing I said was, Iowans know right from wrong. And that was told to me by this sweet little lady who's my neighbor. She's in her late 80s. She's a widow. And she signed on to the New Star ammonia pipeline because they kept at her. They kept coming at her. They kept coming at her. They kept coming at her. And finally she gave in. They came to her home. They made promises. They lied to her. They told her that, all her neighbors had signed. And they gave her almost nothing. She wrote 2 letters to our governor, Governor Kim Reynolds. Guess what? She never got an answer. So what happens is that my brave neighbor, and her statement is in the New Star Pipeline IUB filings. You can read it. She, came to the meeting the New Star meeting, the hearings, 2 days, even though she had voluntarily signed. New Star never bothered to tell her about the dangers of the ammonia pipeline before she signed either. So she regretted that she had signed that document. And I think there are many, many people who regret, but they give in to the pressure for various reasons. The second thing that I said to the IUB board is, there are thousands of objections on file. Are you reading these? You know, you have to read them. In fact, there was more than 1,000 objections to these pipelines 1 year before the meeting on May 6th, when Ted and I went to the IUB for the first time. And when I asked the board members how many objections, they said, oh, we don't know. You can, go to the information place after. We'll escort you there and they'll tell you. 2 days later, they called me up and told me that there were almost 1,000 objections filed at that time. So there have to be thousands more. I could spend every moment of my day reading objections. But the main thing I wanted the board to know was the history of the eminent domain laws in Iowa. Now, I'm a lawyer. I went to an egghead law school, okay? And you know what? But I'm just a normal person. Anyway, so when I started researching this, to write 2 briefs, and you can find my briefs in the IUB objections, and I wish you'd read it because they're better than what I can say here. But anyway, in 2006, remember when Senator King or Congressman King was talking about the Kelo case that was so awful? Yeah, it was awful. It was so awful that the Iowa legislature took up a bill, and what they did, it was as a backlash to Kelo, they made the law stronger to protect Iowa farmland. And 26 other states did the same thing. So Kelo is there on the federal level, but it wasn't here in Iowa. There were additional protections for farmland. But Governor Vilsack vetoed that legislation. For the first time in 40 years in the state of Iowa, and boy, did this make me proud, the Congress went into special session for the first time in 40 years, and what they did was they overrode Vilsack's veto, 90 to 8 in the House, 41 to 8 in the Senate. The Iowans know what is right. So the fourth point I made was that legislation they passed in 2006 said that there were no economic arguments allowed in eminent domain cases. That's Iowa Code 6A.2222B. The law specifically says that public use, public purpose, or public improvement cannot include economic development activity when it comes to using the state's power of eminent domain to condemn agricultural land. Now, doesn't that sound like, whoa? The plain meaning of the words there? There's nothing ambiguous about those words. So we can conclude that the whole purpose and intent of the Iowa legislature concerning property rights in ag land is to protect that land from being exploited. And the fifth point I made was, gee, the legislature has not changed these laws. These laws are still in effect, still on the books. That means those laws protecting ag land are still in full force in effect. They've never been revoked in the state of Iowa. Then, the sixth point, and this makes me want to do a dance, in November of 2021, the United States Supreme Court entered a case. It was called Cedar Point Nursery versus Hasid, and our prior speakers talked about that too. I'm going to go into it a little more detail. In that case, the Supreme Court said that even a temporary physical invasion of private property is a per se taking, unless it's for public purposes and compensated. And again, there's nothing ambiguous about those words. Cedar Point states that the power to exclude the bundle of sticks, you have many different powers of ownership. The power to sell your property, to let somebody, use it for certain purposes. But the most important part, Cedar Point said, was the power to exclude others. There are some exceptions in Cedar Point, but they do not apply to us. And it's all only contemplated that a public purpose is what eminent domain is used for. Eminent domain can be used for sewers and electricity and water and all those traditional things. There's nothing that our founding fathers or nothing that the legislature in 2006 could have remotely, none of us could have contemplated what's happening in Iowa right now with toxic high-pressure CO2 lines. Remember that ag land cannot be taken by eminent domain for economic purposes, but the IUB has authorized eminent domain of ag land without, that's what it means, they've already done it without any specific or explicit statutory authority. The bottom line is that 3 unelected officials in the state of Iowa are out of control, and they have to be reined in by the legislature. Thousands of people have spoken, but it seems like nobody's listening, but we're all waking up. The IUB has refused to acknowledge that ag land has special protections, and this means that the state of Iowa is acting illegally. And that means something. So Cedar Point Nursery has 79B15 void on its face and unenforceable. That means the law is no good all the way back to its beginning. And the other point is that's very important is that after the Cedar Point case, and this is the law of the land, private property rights are right alongside freedom of speech and religion. You would have thought that was the way it was before. Okay? So the IUB is allowing not just a taking, but a per se taking. Per se taking means it's a straight violation of the law. There's no excuses, there's no exceptions, and they're still allowing it. The 8th point, I'm getting there, that Judge John M. Sandy of Clay County, Iowa, made in his wonderful 19-page order that's going straight to the Supreme Court of Iowa, and after that, I'm sure it's going straight to the Supreme Court of the United States. He wrote that order. It was extraordinary. It was a thorough exam of the federal law and how Iowa law applies. He also points out, and this is critical too, that no Iowa cases have been decided since Cedar Point Nursery. That means that when the Dakota Access case was there, Putinini, that's commonly known as the Dakota Access case, the Iowa Supreme Court had no precedent to follow, but they do now. We know that when that case came down that everybody thinks is such controlling law in Iowa, that it was wrongly decided, that it violated our rights. Well, what was the Iowa Supreme Court to do? 2 years had already passed. The pipeline was already in existence. It was already operating. The dirty deed was already done. Remember that song, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Deep in Cabrini Green where the mayor sleeps? Well, it's happening here in Iowa. So the reasoning behind that Putinini case was that if it benefits anyone, anywhere in the planet, it's a public use. I told you I wasn't going to be nice. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. This is a stretch that anybody can recognize. So we decreased the price of gas in India by 5 cents a gallon. That's a public use for Iowa. That's why they can take our property. That is not right. So, and a lot of farmers were harmed by that decision. I've been in so many meetings where these great big wonderful guys in striped pants like my father-in-law was and farmer bibs, they're practically crying when they talk about the damage that's been done to their land. So, and you know what? If that argument came before Chief Justice John Roberts, what do you think he's going to say after Cedar Point Nursery? He's going to say, that is not the way we look at property rights, private property rights. So, but, you know, some of the navigator, they don't want to pay attention to Judge Sandy's order. That's the last thing in the world they want to do. And so they're saying, oh, that's just an outlier. That doesn't mean anything. But it's my opinion, and I even believe it more right now, that there's an awful lot of money floating around in Iowa. And a lot of people are getting paid off. But you know, those two judges who don't like the Clay County case, this is not a mainstream media political poll. It only takes one case that's right on point, that states the law clearly, and that's what his order says. But let's look at this a little bit clearer. Let's say, let me say this: 3 unelected people think they can change Iowa's law. Let me remind you what this plain meaning of the words say. Public use, public purpose, or public improvement cannot include economic development activity when it comes to using the state's power of eminent domain to condemn agricultural land. That's called plain meaning of the words. So, here in Iowa, we have an administrative agency where the so-called experts have appointed themselves, they've been appointed by the governor, but they think they have the power, as decision makers for the legislature and for all of the people of Iowa. And nobody can stop them. So let me give you some examples of administrative agencies. FBI, CIA, Homeland Security, EPA, OSHA, IRS, Iowa Utilities Board, CDC, NSA, Iowa Utilities Board. You get it? And the other state commissions that our other speakers have been speaking of. I don't know all their names. They think they can generate rules because they are the experts, and nobody can stop them. They are the judge, the jury, and the executioner. If we go back to our civics, we find out there's 3 branches of government, right? Legislative, executive, judicial. Remember that concept of checks and balances, where we're all supposed to, we're supposed to do it right? Well, you know what? Our Supreme Court of the United States has recently forcefully reiterated that government power must have a check and balance. There's a case, West Virginia versus EPA, and there was a case that came out just last week. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. What they have decided, and this is the right way to think, some decisions are just too big for an administrative agency to decide. This needs to go in front of the people. The legislatures have to decide, not the experts who have no skin in the game. And I know Winston Churchill had a statement about that. He said, and I can't remember what it was, but he was right. You don't ask the experts. You ask the common man, because they're the ones who really hurt. It's not the guy who's sitting in Des Moines or any of the other places. So the IUB is changing our state constitution. They're ignoring the Fifth Amendment to our Constitution and Article 1, Section 8 of the Iowa Constitution. By not controlling the IUB, the Iowa legislature is letting loose a Frankenstein monster on all the citizens in Iowa. Worse yet, the monster is controlled by predatory globalists. The eminent domain is being used as a hammer against our farmers. They say, all your neighbors have already signed, the idea, you're a bad neighbor if you don't sign. You know, if you don't agree, we're just going to get it by eminent domain anyway, and then you won't get anything. I've heard that story from others. It was a really grave error for the IUB to grant the New Star ammonia pipeline the power of eminent domain. What they did was destroy a heritage farm in Iowa, 140 years held by one family, a century farm, 100 years held by one family. In that case, it is on its way to appeal right now. I was there for the hearing, 2 full days. My husband, my neighbor, Anita, we heard all the evidence, I reviewed all the exhibits. There was even an SE filing that showed New Star's intention to make unbelievable amounts of money in global markets. The arguments were all about making money for New Star. It wasn't about safety for our children, wasn't who play within several feet of a toxic pipeline. It's not about our schools. It's not about nursing home residents who would never be able to escape a toxic cloud. It's not about training first responders and giving them the equipment they need to deal with this, which is extraordinary to save lives. It was all about dotting the I's and crossing the T's for the IUB and making money for New Star. It was a David and Goliath experience. It was horrifying. And that petition, as I said before, was granted. New Star's petition was granted within days of our governor appointing 2 new members of the board. And my theory is that, at least one of the members of the board was going to say, no, we can't do this. Maybe she had already read all the objections. Wouldn't that be? And the thing that's most concerning right now is that the IUB is expediting the pipeline petitions. Take a look at some of the actual letters that are on file if you go to the IUB board. Did you ever read one of the staff letters? It actually tells the pipeline companies how to change its exhibits and its petition to make it go faster for them. And they use the word expedite because we want to expedite your petition. So basically, the IUB is the pipeline industry's dog, and our governor, and it appears former governors, are the pipeline industry's dog. And once again, I'll just jump on this a little bit. Why didn't that bill pass our legislature last year? You know what? It had all the support in the House. It went to a 3-member subcommittee who decided for all of Iowa that they didn't want to bring it to the floor. And you know what? One of the members of that subcommittee was a temporary member. The guy was sick. The regular member was sick, so they put in somebody temporarily who just conveniently decided, there's not enough votes to pass this, so we won't bring it to the floor, which was wrong. We need a roll call vote to decide who is really supporting Iowa's Constitution and who is really a dupe for the pipelines. There's no doubt in my mind that there's lucrative positions for jobs in the pipeline industry, for former members of the IUB and our former governors. This is called regulatory capture. The pipelines have captured our public officials. The lobbyists tell the legislators what to do. The people of Iowa have no say over their own land. If we had real investigative reporters in Iowa, and I think we do, I hope we do, they might find out that Governor Reynolds received substantial campaign donations from the pipelines, that former Governor Wilczek is in a consulting position with the pipelines, and his son sits on the board, I think, of one of those companies that's now threatening Iowa. But wait a minute, that's already common knowledge, isn't it? I heard this morning, and I've been reading it in the objections that have been filed with the IUB. But it doesn't seem like our Iowa legislators are listening, at least not the senators. You know, that House bill wasn't perfect, I will say that. But it would have gone to committee. They would have duked it out, and we would have ended up with a good bill that was at least clarifying Iowa's law. You know, so Iowa people, they know right from wrong, and they are moral people. We're hardworking, we're stable, we're strong. I'm really proud to be a resident of Iowa. Oh God, I wish I had moved here 20, 50, 60 years ago. The final thing I said to the board, and this is number 14, you do not have the authority to allow a private for-profit company to take farmland, period. You must clearly and decisively reject all eminent domain requests of any pipeline. And I'll say it again, the IUB is abusing its authority. It can grant eminent domain only for public uses and never against ag land. The IUB must unequivocally deny all requests of any pipeline to exercise eminent domain authority over our farms. So let me be perfectly clear, and here's your punchline. Iowa farmers do not have to allow surveys. Iowa farmers do not have to let trespassers onto their land. Iowa farmers do not have to engage in mediation or arbitration. Iowa farmers do not have to give in to the administrative state. Furthermore, all forced surveys may be void. That means no good, back to the beginning. Any voluntary, so-called voluntary easement signed by farmers without full disclosure of the dangers of the pipeline could be fraudulent, could be considered fraudulent and voidable. Finally, if the IUB grants or permits any surveys without a landowner's consent, each member of the board can be sued individually for civil rights violations under federal law. That's section 42 U.S.C. 1983. I don't think I'd like to get that kind of a subpoena, would you? No. And you know what? And the state of Iowa itself can be sued for the same thing because it is allowing that travesty to happen under color of law. If they know a law is unconstitutional and they do it anyway, that's a violation of our civil rights, you guys. So the state of Iowa has to rein in its dog, the IUB. So how do we deal with these global predators? Well, this is what I think, and I've been doing a lot of reading lately, as we all know, I'm sure. We got to speak the plain truth, okay? Timeless truth creates order and understanding. They're trying to obfuscate every darn thing you can imagine. Speak the plain truth. Match the words to the realities. These pipelines are not for a public use. They're the newest scam to make billions off of tax credits. And now I find out till 2033, oh my God, I'll be dead, and I should be by then if that happens. But anyway, second, we have to exercise judgment and use common sense. I'll give you a stupid example. Cow farts don't hurt the environment. Okay? Let's read Teddy Roosevelt's accounts of how many buffaloes roamed our country from Ohio to California just 100 years ago. And CO2 won't hurt us unless it's compressed under high pressure in our backyards. And Iowa's not Texas. We're a farming community. You know, this is like, we do not need pipelines traversing every mile of our state. And I've heard from some people, they're contemplating 3 pipelines on their land. Destroying our farmland is suicide, not just for us, but for parts of the whole world. So we have to say what is true. We have to stop the fantasy. Men are not women, and women are not men. Okay? The pipelines are being used to further global agendas. We know this is true. You know, look at what's happening to the farmers in the Netherlands that was brought up before. And the land toxic pipelines, this is another one that's hugely important, are not common carriers and they are not utilities. Just because you put a pipe in the ground doesn't mean you're a utility. There is no definition of those two things in our Iowa code. We've looked over and over. And the land that the pipelines take will never be the same. It'll be damaged for decades, if not forever. And as another speaker brought up, there's been so many good speakers today, my head is swimming. What's the darn hurry? We need to slow this pony down, remember? Safety standards haven't even been developed by PHMSA yet. This technology is so new, and they're playing games with the critical amount. My husband's an engineer. He knows this better than me. You talk to him later about it. To say that the high-pressure CO2 pipelines are safe is just a hope, and it's speculation. It's easy for the pipelines to say that they'll meet or exceed all safety standards when there aren't any safety standards yet. That's another common sense deal. And other technologies are being developed as we speak to harvest CO2 if that is necessary at ethanol plants. Look at the research that our own state is doing. Iowa State University at Ames, our best and our smartest future engineers are working on this right now. So what's a hurry? Does it really make sense for the Midwest to be guinea pigs for the world? We need a person full-time to help us with this. Somebody who can travel and is a good speaker, and it's not me. I'm retired. We need a full-time, good, dedicated person, and so I want to put that in there. And you know what? No matter what I do, no matter what we all do, it's going to feel like it's never enough. But we have to do it anyway. So one final thing, if you remember nothing else from my speech, remember that if you take one deep breath of the CO2 in a high pressure toxic pipeline rupture, you're dead. And everything around you is dead. Your kids, your dogs, your cats, the birds, the frogs, everything. We can't do this to ourselves. This is stupid. So, here's my last thing. Do what matters, you guys. Do it. We have to do it.
Thank you so much, Carol. And I love that prayer. Thank you. I'd like to take just a minute to have the legislators in the audience please stand up. I know many times it feels to you guys like the legislature isn't listening. Those of us that are here, we are listening. We know, but as I said, thank you, everybody. Until and unless we get our communities and our city neighbors to know that this affects them too, we won't have enough votes to get it through our Senates.
Thanks, Cindy. She never knows this is coming, by the way. I just jump in here, and I appreciate it. Also, it's come to my attention, there's a good number of county supervisors here, and you're taking on a big load, so I'd ask if you'd all stand and look at each other, connect with each other, get to know each other. You need to be working together, too. If you please stand, county supervisors. Okay. What'd you say?
Now, I heard somebody say it was a mayor of a small town. Are there any elected city officials, any town mayors or city council people here? If there are, please stand up. Because one of the things, thank you, there's one. One of the things we know is these pipeline companies are coming through and they're promising big dollars to the city councils and to the counties to take care of, oh, we'll give you a new sewer system, we'll help you with your new water lines, we'll give you money for your street repairs, and so they're selling out. And so, yeah, I agree. Well, the ones in my county have gotten things like that, so we need to be aware of that. So now we're going, here's Steve again.
Okay. Thanks again, Cindy. I mentioned at the beginning here how much people have contributed for time and money, and we're running on a very, very thin budget. A few of us have written the checks we can write, but as you know, it's going to take resources for an executive director to professionalize this. In the end, we're going to get to attorney fees at some point along the way. You'll hear some more of that later on today and how that is. Person has contributed a lot to this and worked day and night and organized things is Barb Clayton, and she is headed up her operation is Go Events 101, and because of Barb, we're able to do this. If you take this link out of the chain, there is no event going on here today. So I'd ask you can go to Go Events 101. Barb will tell you how, and I'm going to pass her the microphone so that you get it from the horse's mouth. No, the filly's mouth.
Well, thank you, Steve, but my contribution hasn't been nearly as big as others in the room. So can we have them stand up for just a second? All the people that have helped put this together, there's Tammy back there, and Steve Corey, this group, it was just kind of thrown together. We came together and saw a need. Anyway, if you go to goevents101.com, those of you that registered, that's the same site you registered on. I have extended the donation link below the registration. You donate in increments of $100. If you want to donate a different amount, my phone number is on the site. My email address is on the site, so you can call me, and I can take care of that for you. But if you go to it, you'll see this picture in the thumbnail. This is the one. There's another pipeline one, which is us too. So if you get to the other pipeline one, that's CO2 pipeline, that's us. We have multiple on my site. There's 2 different ones. So thank you, everybody.